we went from focusing on talent management and recruiting and succession and all these really positive things to all of a sudden becoming experts on CDC guidance and what sort of tests are good and what sort of tests are bad. So it put a lot of stress on human resources professionals.
Joining me today is Keith Rummer, Senior Vice President, Chief People, Diversity, and Inclusion Officer with Phillips Edison. So Keith, here at REITworks, you were on a panel focused on influencing decision makers. What do you think is the most important thing for HR professionals to keep in mind when it comes to getting executive management engaged and on board?
Yeah, if you're talking specifically, we'll call it the managing up part, executive management. One thing that I've learned over a few years is that you got to come from a position of really being informed, and you really need to have your finger on the pulse of the organization. I love data, and a lot of in the real estate industry, I think a lot of us do, but I have to use it very strategically, very purposefully. I've learned that you can over rely upon data, but what you can't over rely upon is the sentiment within the organization. I think our CEO, my board, that we have a great relationship. What they count on me for is really understanding what's going on in the organization. And so my challenge is being able to stay close enough to what's going on in the organization, how people are feeling with my team, so that when I do have those opportunities to influence with our senior management team, I can bring those real stories to life. And I've learned that actually brings a lot of the data and the things that oftentimes I may be trying to get across. If I can attach a real story to it, a personal, something that happened in the organization. Oftentimes you will remove the names to protect the innocent, but if you can really bring it to life through a story, I've found those to be really compelling ways to really drive home and get the sort of buy-in and have that sort of influence with senior management.
So obviously you talked about sort of setting some of these goals. When implementing long-term initiatives like improving diversity and inclusion at a company or even within an industry, what are the best ways to measure and manage results and expectations?
There's a lot of fear, there's anxiety. Sometimes it's what people don't know or what they might misperceive. For example, I can recall in a past organization having discussions around DE&I of, if we start setting goals and we don't meet those goals, then we're going to be viewed as failures, and we're just setting ourselves up for failure, etc. And so you've got to get some wins along the way. And so I think it may not always be the end goal of where you want to go, but if you can set things that you want to accomplish along the way towards a greater goal, you can start to gain comfort. And in D&I, there's a lot of different ways you can do that. You can be looking, for example, at your engagement data and what questions are you asking around general sense of inclusion and belonging, and slice that data. How is that affecting different parts of the organization? That's not ultimately getting to what oftentimes people think about, which is representation numbers of underrepresented groups within either your general population or even senior management. But if you can start making those, putting lines in the sand, if you will, and looking for improvement, it makes that dialogue around the ultimate goal a lot less scary for people.
Obviously, the pandemic changed the way a lot of employers and employees look and think about the work environment. In what ways do you see the HR function, especially as a link between management and the staff, having changed the most significantly as a result of COVID?
Yeah, almost everything you read about the effect on HR, this was a huge impact to HR. A lot of human resources professionals left the business of human resources because it was so stressful. We went from focusing on talent management and recruiting and succession and all these really positive things to all of a sudden becoming experts on CDC guidance and what sort of tests are good and what sort of tests are bad. So it put a lot of stress on human resources professionals. Thank goodness I think are starting to see the light and focusing on the things that are positive. But I think the positive that came out of that is organizations had to lean on those in the organization, whether they were human resources professionals or not, but those who, again, getting back to the finger on the pulse of the organization, because every decision you made along the way back in March of 2020 and through 2020 and 21, had a real impact to people, and they were emotional. I mean, we were no different, I'm sure, than many organizations, that the reaction to every single communication, every action was, met with extremes on both ends. From people clamoring to, please let me get back into a physical office so I can get away from my kitchen table and my husband who's in the other room, to, oh my gosh, you're going to put us in an office, are you trying to kill me? And it just ran the complete gamut. And one thing I certainly became even more sensitive to during that whole process is just recognizing that the emotion is real, and that there's for every emotion, for every person, for every opinion, there's a story behind it, and really not to judge. And not to judge why, but it is tough as especially as the head of a human resources function. You've got that delicate balance. Associates need to feel that you are there for them, that you have their best interests in mind, that you're advocating for the needs of associates. But there's also an expectation that you are acting on behalf of the organization,